Last week, Pastor Ron, who's my dad, if you didn't catch that, you may hear me call him Dad some today. I'm not being weird. He's actually my dad. But he launched us last week into our Christmas series, God With Us. And he launched with a message called With Us in Our Waiting. And it was just an awesome message. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely check it out. But he talked about how much he hates waiting. And I can really relate with that. Anybody else can relate with hating waiting? He will drive. Like, he's not lying when he says he'll drive way out of the way to avoid traffic. Like, we've been on road trips where there was maybe like a 10-minute traffic jam, and then we drove like 2 hours out of the way. We like went into another state. But I get it. Some of that rubbed off on me, and I also hate waiting. And I was actually reminded of his message this week because we had a doctor's appointment for our son Judah. And I don't know if you've been to the doctor recently, but I don't know if it's always been like this. Probably. Maybe I just forgot. But that is a place to wait. Like, for real. And waiting by yourself isn't always the most fun. But you don't know torture till you've waited with a small child. Any parents attest to that fact? Yes. Thankfully, there's been the invention of iPads and tablets and things like that to help. We didn't have those when I was a kid. But I also don't remember waiting as much. But I probably did. But I took Judah to the doctor, and we waited forever. And it was so funny because we waited so long that he actually was getting annoyed, which I felt like I needed to parent him and be like, no, you just have to be patient. But I was feeling the same way. And I kind of had this epiphany, which this is some groundbreaking stuff here. You guys are going to be shocked with my epiphany here, that when we wait for something, there's an end goal. So when you're waiting at the doctor, you're waiting to see the doctor. When you go out to eat, me and Christy went out Friday night. It was an interesting choice. We waited for 45 minutes to get to eat at our table, and there's just that end goal. And so while I was sitting there thinking about that in the doctor's office, I felt like God kind of gave me this thought of, in life, what is that? What is that end goal? He's with us in our waiting, but what are we waiting on? And I really felt like he was saying to me that way too often we miss actually what life is all about, because we're, you could say, sure, making it to heaven, living a full life. Those are great end results. But I think that a lot of life is actually lived in the everyday. What if living every day with Jesus is the goal, and what if that's actually what life is all about? And that takes us to our first takeaway on the screen. But what if the monotonous is actually the miraculous? I'm trying to preach a little bit here, just a little bit. But what if the monotonous is actually miraculous? We often hear people say, your walk with God and walking with God every day. And I've grown up in church, so that's something that I just kind of get. I get the concept, but I know for some people, they're like, what does that actually mean? What does walking with God actually mean? Well, the term usually is used to describe a mark of solid faith or consistency with Jesus, and that's kind of what we're going to attempt to define today. So what does walking with God look like? And today's message is actually titled, God with Us Every Day, because I truly believe that he is with us to walk life out every day. So as you guys saw, I play drums. I don't know if anyone noticed my horrible count in at the beginning of that song. I know Mike did. Yeah, you did. You smirked at me. Me and Mike, we give each other a lot of a hard time when we mess up on the drums, and I could feel him smirking at me. But so drums is by far the funnest instrument. I always say that. If you want to play a fun instrument, play the drums. If you want to play a useful instrument, play the guitar. If you want to get a girlfriend, play the piano. But drums is so much fun, and music is all about rhythm, particularly the drums. And I was looking up the definition of rhythm, and it's a strong, regular, repeated pattern of movement or sound. Rhythm is music's pattern in time. So in a song, when you're playing together, you've got a certain rhythm, okay? And so we as a band, we try to continually get better. We try to be the best we can, and we play with something called a metronome. And so that metronome, it's a consistent It's a consistent sound that helps us as a band stay on rhythm so that we can be at that particular place in time in the song at the right spot. And I want to do a little test with you guys today. So I'm actually going to play a metronome here in just a second in the mic. And what I need you guys to do is I need you to clap. Okay, so you're going to hear the beat, and then you're going to clap with the beat. And I'm going to let it go for a second. Then I'm going to take that metronome away, and then we're going to keep clapping. And then I'm going to bring it back. And you're going to be off. If you're not, this is ruining this whole object lesson. But if you're not, I'm going to recruit most of y'all to the worship team. But then I want you to see if you can get back on once you have that beat back, okay? Make sense? Ready good? All right, let's try it. Pretty good, pretty good. Okay. Okay, you're on the off beat. You're back on. Okay. You guys are great. Give yourself another hand. So, let me turn that off in my back pocket. So, as you can see, when the beat is there, when you can hear it, it's really easy to stay on it. When it's gone, at first it feels pretty easy because you can still hear it. It's like, oh yeah, there it is. Then after a while, you're like, am I speeding up a little bit? Am I slowing down a little bit? Where is it? And then as soon as it comes back, it's like, oh, there it is, right there. And I find that just to be a really amazing example of God in our life, because God is our life's metronome. He sets the rhythm, and without him, we can't play the song he called us for. So walking with God every day really requires this everyday step with Jesus, because if we're not constantly looking to him, looking to see what that rhythm, what that beat is, what that pace is for our lives, what he's speaking to us, then we're going to get off track. We're going to drift, just like with the metronome will drift. And in our lives, what does that drift look like? Well, it looks like, having a bad attitude. It looks like not being who God created you to be as a husband, as a wife, as a friend, not bringing your best to work, all of those things. And I know for me in my own life, I'm sure Christy could attest to this, if I haven't been spending time with Jesus, there's definitely a drift. I'm not who I want to be. I might have less patience. I might have, just more complaining, things like that come from not spending that every time day with God. So just remembering that we need to continually check in with him and hear his voice so that he can keep us on track, keep us on pace. And that really takes us to today's story. So today we're going to talk about Joseph. And Joseph is somebody that I love the story of Joseph. We'll do a series on Joseph. I've been wanting to do something on Joseph for a while. And I started this message, and then I was like, wow, this story is so big. There's no way I can preach this entire story. But what an amazing story. Who's familiar with the story of Joseph in here? Okay, so again, as someone who grew up in church, I heard Bible stories my whole life, and you hear them, you remember the lesson that you learned in it, but one of the most amazing things that's really happened to me lately in a lot of prep for speaking and things like that is realizing how stories connect. And it actually has made me feel at times a little bit silly, because I'm like, how did I not know that? But the story of Joseph, to really fully understand the story of Joseph, we have to back up just a little bit and look at his father. So Joseph's father was Jacob. And the story of Jacob is a long one, but basically towards a lot of stuff happens for Jacob. And then he basically leaves his father's house and goes out to find a wife. He meets a lady that he really likes, makes a deal with her father, works for 7 years to have her hand in marriage. This girl that he really wanted to marry had an older sister. The father pulled a trick swap and gave the older sister as the wife, tricked him. He ended up having to work 7 more years to get to marry Rachel. It's a pretty crazy story. And the Bible's actually pretty crazy. The more you read the Bible, the more you're like, wow. Like, anytime that I feel like I'm, anytime you feel like your mess might be too big for Jesus, just read the Bible. You'll see there's some stuff that happens in there, and Jesus always was big enough and always comes through. But in that story, Jacob ends up having children with Leah or Leah. I never exactly know how to say it. I know Leah always wants to be called Leah, so I'm just going to default to Leah. But then Rachel can't have children, so she actually ends up having Jacob have some children with a couple of her servants, and it's a crazy story. There's a lot of kids involved. But then finally, Jacob has a son with Rachel, and this is the girl he wanted to marry from the beginning, and that son was Joseph. So when we look at the story of Joseph, you find Joseph here, and growing up again, I heard this story, and I heard, his brothers hated him, all this stuff, and I never really understood why his brothers hated him. But then seeing that connection to the story of Jacob and seeing how, I'm sure Jacob definitely played favorites with him. We can see from the story that he did, and that created this divide, this rift in Joseph and his brothers. And the story, again, it's a long story, but Joseph has a dream. He tells his brothers his dream. Lack of wisdom there. He shouldn't have done that. His brothers get really angry with him, and they actually they plan to kill him. So he goes to visit his brothers to check in on them to make sure they're doing the work properly for their father. And they plot to kill him, but then they decide, hey, why would we kill him if we can actually just sell him and make a buck? Which, it's not terrible logic. But, and that's kind of where we'll pick up the story here. So in Genesis 39, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household and entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in house and in field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food that he ate. Sounds pretty nice, actually. So the first real takeaway here is in verse 2, it says, the Lord was with Joseph. God with us. Joseph didn't start out being in charge of Potiphar's house. He was sold into slavery. This wasn't his plan. This wasn't what he expected to happen with his life. It wasn't what he wanted to happen. But he was sold into slavery. He wound up working in Potiphar's house. But God was with him. Joseph made choices every day to be who God made him to be, no matter where he was, no matter what season he was in, and God was with him. And when God's with us, we can do anything. He gives us favor. He helps us through whatever situation we have. And the first key to following God is choosing him every day. That's our first point. So for God to be with us, we have to choose him. That's really what I want to make clear here is he's always there, but we still have to choose him. So when Joseph went to Potiphar's house, when he went into this situation, he could have ran from God. He could have been like, wow, really? This is what I get for trying to serve you faithfully? This is what my reward is? But instead, he chose God, and God was with him and worked for his benefit. We can't do life on our own and expect to succeed, to have joy in life. We need God, and he's always right there ready to help us. But he won't unless we choose him. Our second takeaway here is, if you miss or minimize his presence, you minimize the impact of his help. Say that again. If you miss or minimize his presence, you minimize the impact of his help. So I grew up in Virginia. We moved there when I was in third grade, I think, and spent all the rest of my elementary school there and up until 10th grade of high school. And then we moved back to Arkansas. So in Virginia, I went to a Christian school. It was a really small school. It was awesome. Great people. My class was tiny. We had 13 people in my class, I think, like very small. And so when we moved to Arkansas, I actually went to a public school, and I had never gone to a public school. So I went from a class of 13 people. We had 3 girls in my class, and I had known all of them since third grade. then I went to a public school with 300 people in my class. Actually, there was more than that. So there was like 300 girls in my class, and like it was just this crazy new experience. I had gone to school where I had Bible class. I had gone to school where I had friends who went to church together and stuff like that. And then I was in this new public school where a lot of people didn't believe in God. There was a lot of stuff going on that I had never seen before. And I remember it was really kind of a defining moment in my own personal walk with God, because no one knew who I was. So I got there, and there were no preconceived expectations of who I was in school or anything like that. And again, I was faced with all these things that I had never seen before. And I played basketball, and I don't know if anyone here has played sports, but on sports, you travel with a bunch of guys, and it can be a pretty interesting situation. And I just remember, though, I had this opportunity there for the first time in my life to decide whether I was going to choose Jesus or whether I was going to be like everyone else around me. And completely by the grace of God, that wasn't a decision I could just make on my own, but I chose Jesus. And because I chose Jesus, he gave me the strength to be who he made me to be. And it was so fascinating to me because I honestly thought people were going to make fun of me, or they were going to like not like me as much, or things like that. But the weirdest thing was I got this crazy favor on the basketball team. My coach said when I got there, he was like, I was pretty good at basketball, but when I got there, he was like, I don't play 10th graders. You're never going to play. So there were those kind of things. Older seniors were like, you should quit, stuff like that. Well, through the course of the season, on the basketball bus, people would be texting pornography to each other, or passing alcohol or stuff like that. And no one would ever text me. They knew that I loved Jesus. They didn't even text me. They wouldn't even offer me the stuff. And it was just like, I remember once this guy, he was the roughest guy on our basketball team. Like, he was the guy that like your parents did not want you to be friends with. And somebody came up and they were trying to get me to smoke. And he was like, what are you doing? Barnard doesn't do that. Leave him alone. And it was just such an interesting moment for me. But it was beautiful to see that. And throughout that whole year, God gave me favor. I had been somewhat up until that point in my life that wasn't the best student ever. And, I for the first time in my life, made straight A's. I started in the state tournament when we went to play. I actually started as a 10th grader. Was the only one that got to play. And it just was really amazing to see God's blessing on me in that season of my life, just because of that one simple decision to choose him. And again, none of this was me. None of this was in my power. But it was because I chose him. And that is really the first step of being who we need to be with God. Walking with God every day is just choosing him, because that's the first step. So picking up the story, actually I want to read Matthew 28:20. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. God's favor is a force to be reckoned with, and it starts with us choosing him. So continuing our story, chapter 39, verse 7, it says, now Joseph was well built and handsome. That's how I'm often described. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. That's pretty amazing that he refused. I love Joseph's just fortitude here, because it literally says he refused to even be with her. He wasn't even trying to be around that temptation. He wasn't even trying to get anywhere near it. And that's not something he was doing on his own. That was something he was doing because he had chosen God. So our second point is walking with God every day builds integrity and character that can only come from God. And that's the key there. It's not that we somehow can have integrity and character without God. I don't know if you've seen the world around us. There's not a lot of integrity and character. Even among Christians, it's hard. It's hard to have. But if we walk with God every day, he gives us what we need. He fills us up. He gives us the ability to be who he called us to be. And when I was in college, I had this amazing mentor. Some of the Chi Alpha guys here will know him, but his name is Anthony Saladino, and one of the most hardcore Jesus people I've ever met. And he was telling us a story about a time when he was in college, and him and a group of his friends, they all lived together, and they had really decided that they wanted to follow Jesus, like they were going to do it. And like a lot of guys, they struggled with some things like pornography and just making wise decisions with some of their girlfriends and things like that. And so they made this pact with each other that they were going to choose God and they were going to do whatever it took to be who God made them to be. So they went into their apartment and they took all the doors off. So they took, except the bathroom door, they were like, nah, we'll leave that one. But they took all the doors off of everybody's room so that no one had any secret space. And then they took all of their computers and they put them in the kitchen. They put them all at the table, and they moved all the phones and all their phone chargers into the communal spaces. And they actually decided that they wouldn't take their phones into their rooms. Like, that was part of their agreement. Like, we will not be on our phones in our rooms. And so they went out and they bought, like, some of you guys will, I don't mean this offensive, old school alarm clocks that, like, go next to your bed, like the big ones that are like, wah, wah, wah. And they bought those and put them in their rooms. And that was what they did. And it was amazing, just his story of how those steps and those decisions just completely changed who they were and altered the course of what God had called him to do. And he continually said that wasn't something they could do in their own strength. They had all, tried to be better, tried to do better, tried to follow God, but that was something that God gave them the ability to do, and something that they pushed each other to do. And that's one of the second points here, is that God will give us what we need to do what he's called us to do, but we have to choose him. And having accountability and friendship is a really key, important to that. The devil will try his hardest to distract us and get our eyes off the path God has for us. He wants to get us off beat. But when we walk with God every day, he gives us what we need to stay on point. However, the adverse of that is true. When we stop choosing God every day, we separate ourselves from him and make ourselves vulnerable to failure because we are depending on our own strength instead of his. And that's something that I think is a great reminder for all of us to have, is that just like when we choose God, he gives us the strength to do what we need to do. Just like with the metronome, when we hear it every day, we can stay on beat, we can stay on track. But if we stop listening to it, we stop hearing it, we drift, we get off track, we start operating in our own strength. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm not very strong in my own strength. And when we operate in our own strength, we're very vulnerable to sin, to bad attitudes, to doing things that we don't want to do because we're trying to do it in our own strength. But God's got strength for us, so let's go to him. Continuing in our story, verse 11 says, one day he went into the house to attend his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called for her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream, help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. She kept his cloak beside her until the master came home. Then she told him the story. The Hebrew you brought came to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. That's pretty rough. Here's a guy that's really trying. He's really trying to follow God. He's trying to be who God called him to be. And life's still hard. Walking with God every day doesn't mean life will only be easy, but it does mean that when it's not, we will be okay because we have God to help us. And I think that's something that is important to remember, because just because we choose God every day doesn't mean that our lives are going to be easy, that things are just going to instantly work out or be perfect. But it does mean that no matter what we face, we have a God who can help us. And I have another object lesson here. I'm a visual learner. My college degree was in film and digital arts. I'm very visual. So if you like that, then you hopefully will remember the metronome and you'll remember this from today. But I'm going to ask Caleb to come up here and help me. Also, fun fact, Caleb and I went to school together at that Christian school. We started together in 4th grade, and I realized last night when I was working on this story and I was going to have him come help me. Oh, thank you. You know I don't want that water. Thanks for that. Judah calls Mountain Dew Mount Mandu, and that's all I call it now. I almost said thanks for that, Mount Mandu. But me and Caleb have we've been friends for 24 years. Yeah, it's crazy. It makes me feel old. Although we're not that old. We're 30, 32. So, let me move this out of the way real quick. All right, so this tote has over 200 pounds of sand in it. All right. Yeah, I do sound like an old man. Okay, so Caleb, could you pick this up? Yeah, don't hurt yourself. So Caleb works at FedEx, and he has to lift stuff a lot. So his wife was like, she was believing in you. She was like, I think he's going to lift it and mess up your object. I was like, I don't know. Okay, so this is heavy, super heavy, right? You can't lift it. All right, CJ, where you at? All right, go stand over there next to Caleb. Okay, so Caleb, does CJ being here make this any lighter? No. So here's where I'm gonna try to connect this, preach a little bit. So in life, sometimes it's hard. Situations are bad, they're tough. Sometimes life is really heavy, super heavy, and we can't carry it on our own. And God's right here with us. CJ's playing God today. I'm sure I love that. So God's right here waiting. But if Caleb doesn't choose to have help from CJ, then he's still lifting this on his own. And it doesn't change the fact that CJ's standing right here. God's always here. He's a consistent. He's that metronome. He's always right here, ready to help us. But if we don't choose him, then we're still carrying it by ourselves. So now you guys try to pick this up together. Hopefully you can. All right. So another question for you guys, or for Caleb. Did picking that up with CJ make it any less heavy? No. It still weighs 200 pounds. And sometimes things in life are hard. Situations are hard. You guys can go. Thank you. Sometimes situations, things in life, they're just super hard. They are. Nothing changes that. But it's easier to carry when we let God carry it with us, when he helps us, when he carries it with us. And life's not fair, and it's hard, and things will be hard. But God's always right there to help us carry the load. I mean, and this analogy only goes so far, because honestly, if this was a situation, we would be, I'd be sitting on this tote and God would be carrying it, because that's what he does for us. Let me see if I can move this back. Don't judge me. I should have put nothing in here and just told y'all it was heavy. Wanted to be real. All right, so continuing with our story, I'm about to summarize like crazy, so buckle in. So Joseph, life wasn't fair. He was trying to do good. He was trying to do what God had him to do, and it went south. He went to jail. He got accused of something he didn't do. But God was with him. Continual theme of Joseph's life. So he goes to prison, and quickly he works his way up to being head of the prison. God gave him favor with the prison guard. He was entrusted with all the prisoners and just continually had favor. A couple of prisoners from the king's court, a baker and the king's taste tester, were thrown into prison They had made the king mad. They both had dreams. They were really upset by their dreams. Joseph noticed because he was an attentive man who followed God, and they asked him if he could interpret them. He said, I can't interpret them, but I know someone who can. I serve a God who can. He interpreted the dreams. The dreams both came true. The baker actually ended up being killed. The taste tester was put back in power, and Joseph said to the taste tester, he said, just remember me, when you go back to have favor with the king. Well, he didn't. He forgot, completely forgot about Joseph. And 2 years passed, and then Pharaoh had a dream, very disconcerting dream. And he went and he asked everyone he knew, all of his soothsayers and anyone he had to gain counsel. And no one knew what it meant, kept having the dream. And I kind of want to watch stuff back in heaven. I hope there is a way you can watch Bible stories. And this is one that I want to see. Not because, I just think it would be humorous. Because here's this guy that, 2 years prior had this crazy miraculous thing where his dream was interpreted and he got restored to power and completely forgot about it. And so then here he's been here. The king's been trying to get people to do this, to figure this out. And then he's just like, wait, I know a guy. I met him in prison. It's always a good start to a story. And so they bring Joseph up. Joseph interprets the dream through the power of God in him. And Pharaoh ends up putting Joseph in charge of everything in Egypt. He's second only to Pharaoh. He even says, nothing in Egypt happens without your command to Joseph. And so here's Joseph coming from, being sold into slavery from his brothers all the way to now being second in power over all of Egypt. And the dream was about a famine, so Joseph, using God's wisdom, stores up crops in good years to have it for times of need. And Joseph's family comes, and it's an amazing story. We'll definitely dive into it more. But he is able to basically redeem his whole family, saves his family, saves his brothers that tried to take him out, saves all of Egypt. And it's just such an amazing, amazing story of redemption. It honestly parallels the story of Christ quite a bit, all the way back in Genesis. And the Messiah in the manger came to be God with us and redeem our lives if we choose to walk with him. And that's our third point here, is that when we walk with God, we walk with redemption, because God is redemption. And no matter what we're going through, no matter what we're facing, he's there. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. The key here is for those that love God. It doesn't say all things work together for good for everybody. It says all things work together for good of those that love God. So whatever you're going through right now, I don't know if your life is great, if there's something hard, if there's a situation that's going on, but if there's something hard, there's a situation, just ask yourself, do I love God? Because if your answer is yes, then you have a promise of redemption that's coming. I think of this often it's kind of like if there was here, visual again, if there was a constantly flowing tap of water here. And this is God. This is every day with God. This is redemption right here. This is the tap. And we have a cup, and it's always flowing. There's nothing we do to change that. But we have to decide to put our cup in it. And trouble in our lives come when our situations and our circumstances, whether good or bad, honestly, sometimes good situations cause this more, where we stop loving God. Because if we stop loving God, we stop accessing the one thing that keeps us on track that can redeem. And when we stop doing that, then it's not God doing anything to us, it's us doing it to ourselves. Again, it's like this steady flow here that's falling. If I take my cup and I drink water from it every day, I don't like water, but if I drink water every day from this, I'll live. But if I stop drinking from it, at some point here, I'm going to shrivel up like a raisin and die. And it doesn't change that the water's still there, but I'm not choosing to access it. And that's really what I want you to take away from today is, please don't do that. Please don't shrivel up and die. Please don't get so far off beat that you don't know how to get your way back. Because we serve a God that's here all the time. He's with us every day, every single day. And he came and died for us. He came in a manger, lived a life, forgave our sins, died for our sins, so that he could be with us every day, that we could live with him every day. The monotonous every day really is miraculous, because we have an opportunity every day to live in the destiny of who God's created us to be, to choose him, to be the best versions of ourselves, to bring the best of who we can to everyone around us. And again, I'm not expecting you to do that on your own. We can't. But if we choose God, he will give us the ability to do that, to be that. A couple of quick practical tips for you on how to walk with God every day. The first one is spend time with Jesus. Again, choose him. Pray, worship. I know these are not super complicated things, but so often we don't do these. Listen. Sometimes I just sit in my car, or I'll just sit in a quiet spot if I can find one, and I won't say anything. I just try to just listen, because I don't want to miss something that God's speaking. I want to know what his voice sounds like. I want to know what the sound of that metronome is, and I want to hear it. And that comes through spending time with Jesus, through praying, through worshiping, through listening. Secondly, love his people. God calls us to love his people. We are his people. People outside that don't know Jesus at all, his people. If we love those around us like Jesus, we'll be amazed at what that does for our heart and our connection and relationship with Jesus. Third, be grateful. Gratitude will change everything about your life. I promise. If you don't like where your life is right now, if you don't like the circumstances around you, you feel unhappy in any way, stop thinking about those things and start thinking about the things in your life that are good, the things in your life that you're grateful for. If you're upset at your spouse, you think they can't do anything right, make a list of the things that you like about them, the things that they do right. Focus on those. Call those things out. Gratitude, it will change everything about how you live. And that comes from Jesus and walking with him every day. And fourth, let Jesus be the driving factor in your decision making. As Christians, we don't make decisions like the rest of the world makes decisions. We listen to the metronome. We see where we are in the musical piece, and we follow it. Make sure that you let God lead your life, that you let him guide your steps. The way we do that is by staying close to him. Keeping your eyes on Jesus is the key to life. In it, we simultaneously see who we are and who we are meant to be with just one look. So to be honest with you guys, I set out today really with this. I had a couple of goals since my dad wasn't here. One, he preaches about me all the time. So I wanted to take this opportunity to just tell a funny story about him or embarrass him in some way. But I got to thinking that he preaches every week, and he saw me as a teenager and has way more dirt on me. So I'm just gonna let that one be what it is. But then secondly, he's been writing a poem every week this entire year, and I'm not a poet. So I was like, I'm gonna write a funny poem that makes no sense, and it's just gonna be fun. And I set out to do that, and God started giving me a poem. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I kept trying to I was in the car and I was like, nah. And then I got home and the words were still there. And I was like, all right, I'll write it down. So I have a poem for you today. It's titled, God with Us Every Day. God with us every day. Through life's ups and downs, he leads the way. constantly there like a metronome, keeping us in time when we start to roam. When distraction and struggle knock on our door, he gives us his strength more and more to be who he wills and calls us to be, to live with passion and gratitude, to be truly free. This journey called life is a beautiful one when we walk with our Savior, God's only Son. In the mundane, monotonous, and seemingly small, we can really live because he gave it all. A baby in a manger, some 2,000 years past, came to be God with us, a promise that lasts. He really is God with us. If you take anything away from today, I want you to remember that he is. He's here every day. And no matter what you're going through in life, good or bad, he wants to be there with you. He wants to walk with you. And the joy and peace and life that you'll find in that relationship with him will blow you away. It'll blow you away.